Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Peach Pundit Podcast. I'm Jason Hahn, joined by Buzz Brockway and Scott Turner. Guys, good to see good to see your faces.
I have a puppy over my right shoulder who is chewing on something, and I'm trying to figure out what. So
I was just about to ask you if Joey's going to make another appearance today.
He is. Come here.
Because his appearance last week was I mean, I actually don't know if it was popular, but I assume it was popular amongst our viewers. And
dogs are generally pretty popular. So
well, he is. He's probably got his own fan club.
More popular than Scott. So
you know what else is you know what else is rising in popularity, and I've just noticed this. So I've drank 6 bottles of water today, and I put them in 2 at a time in my Buc-ee's cup.
Oh man,
yeah. So. I forgot. I saw someone had posted a photo of Buc-ee's. Was it you, Buzz?
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to Buc-ee's yesterday for the first time ever.
So this is my Buc-ee's cup, and I am very excited. They're building one in Florence, South Carolina. So that is right when you get on, either if you're coming from Georgia or going to Georgia, right at the interchange between 20 and 95. So I am very excited about that because
I believe they have 2 in Georgia now.
Yeah,
probably perfectly spaced where you could stop at one, drive all the way down to the other, and by that time you need another tank of gas. And
yeah, I've been to the one in West Georgia, which is where I got this one.
Yeah.
So because that one's off 20. I know there's another one up near Calhoun, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
But Buc-ee's is not just a gas station or a convenience store; it is an experience.
No doubt.
Scott, have you ever been to Buc-ee's?
I have been. I've been to the one near Macon, and I will say that I found my experience to be somewhat overrated. It is huge. Separated at birth, the Buc-ee statue and Buzz Brockway.
That was perfect.
I came home with some beaver nuggets to share with my family. So
yeah, I got to tell you though, I know they're known for their fudge, but their fudge is just way too rich.
Fudge and jerky, right? I mean, like you can get 900 different types of jerky there,
and they have brisket.
The brisket wasn't great.
I'm actually not surprised by this at all.
Yeah. Who thought the gas station brisket would be awesome? You know.
Jeez. So interesting week. Obviously, this week being qualifying week, candidates who are running for office in every statewide, well, not every statewide office. Every statewide office, considering, and in the U.S. Senate race, as well as every single seat in the Georgia General Assembly up for reelection.
Yep. In
November, we got primaries coming up in May. So I guess we just jump right in here and say what are the big surprises, guys?
Biggest surprise is probably Jeff Mullis.
Well, we're gonna talk. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest surprise since you asked it that way. We'll talk about Mullis later. Obviously, we'll tease that, I guess. But you also, we have convicted criminals who are, or at least one convicted criminal, another one who had to settle a civil case for beating up on a grandma in a McDonald's parking lot, who are running, and who knows how many other people who have had it running with the law. I'm sure campaigns are buzzing now with opposition research across the state as they try to figure out who some of these people are who we've never heard of running for the legislature. One, I think, kind of surprise was really late. A gentleman named David Huddleston for House District 72 qualified today, and he's the only person to qualify for House District 72. So congratulations to Mr. Huddleston. You are going to be a state representative for the wild price of $400. So I think that was a surprise. No surprise on the big names, other than I think we had a late entrant into the Democratic side for state superintendent. Is that right, Buzz?
Yes, former state representative Alicia Searcy. Back when she was the representative, she was Alicia Thomas Morgan. Now she's Alicia Thomas Searcy. Just married a few months ago, and seems to be very, very happy. No, I've known Alicia a long time. She's a good lady. She's a Democrat, but she is more school choice than any Republican running for that office. I'll just say that. So that's gonna be an interesting thing. It'll be interesting, can she win the Democratic nomination?
Yeah.
I hope so, but it's an interesting thing. The teachers, the teachers groups, and the superintendents groups, and the school board groups, and all of those people kind of control the Democratic primary for that race. So we'll see if Alicia can mount a people's challenge, because the voters definitely want school choice, even Democratic voters. So that'll definitely be a race to watch.
Yeah, and also the on the Republican side in the state school superintendent office or race, Richard Woods filed for reelection. But the last time I looked at his disclosure, he did not have a lot of money in his account. It was like, if I recall, I don't remember the exact dollar figure. It was like under 50,000.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So curious if he plans on beginning some fundraising. And I haven't looked at the most recent disclosure. But yeah, no, it's and you mentioned, Scott, convicted someone who has a conviction on their record running. I did see a story yesterday, I think last night. And it was it's a guy who is running for Board of Commissioners in Lumpkin County, who is a convicted felon and also a former Klan member, who is running.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, and he's 61 years old. His name's Chester Doles, 61 years old.
He's kind of infamous. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I've never heard of him. Reading from the story here, Doles is running as a Republican for a seat on the Lumpkin County Board of Commissioners. He carries a sign that read, quote, "Stop Socialism, Save America," unquote. It's a slogan borrowed from Georgia's controversial Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who Doles also supports. So.
Well, we also, in the category of somebody who's been convicted, gentleman I use that phrase tongue in cheek, I suppose. I know this guy, a guy named Robert Trim, who is running for House District 35 as the only Republican. It is a Democrat leaning seat, so the likelihood that he would win is a long shot, but it's possible, if there's a red wave, that this guy could potentially be a state representative. He lives in Cobb County, north side of Cobb County, which is becoming more and more blue. And he is known in Cherokee County circles as the guy who filed a false police report against our school superintendent, trying to get him arrested, claiming that the superintendent tried to run him down in his car as he crossed the street one night after a school board meeting, and insisted on filing the report, even though there was video evidence showing him casually walking across the street and the superintendent passing by at 11.7 miles per hour. So he ended up getting arrested. He had to do jail time for that. He was convicted of 2 felonies, and then he appealed his case to the State of Appeals Court, and they knocked it back down to misdemeanors. So he is actually eligible to run, but he will have that hanging over him, and I will make sure of it personally, that it's hanging over him.
Trim's been around a while, and as you mentioned, Scott, controversial to say the least. But I was struck by, there's a lot of retirements. Just a quick rapid math here: 34 in the House between Republicans and Democrats, who are either running. Several of them are running for higher office. Quite a few of them, and several retirements. So it's going to be a lot of turnover. And then there's quite a few primary challenges among Democrats and Republicans, incumbents getting primary challenged. So I mean, with this, depending on how things break, we don't know how serious some of these people are, how formidable they are. But I mean, we could really have a lot of turnover in the House and Senate come next January. So it's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Tarvin picked up 2 opponents. That's weird, because Tarvin is strong in his area. Mike Cameron is a freshman, and House District 1 has a primary. I mean, just looking down the list here, Casey Carpenter, primary, Jason Ridley's primaried, Will Wade, who is a rock star, picked up a primary. Eddie Lumsden picked up a primary. Katie Dempsey has 2 primary opponents.
Yep.
Lots of people running for office this year.
Actually, one thing I noticed real fast, just looking through this, is that public service commission races, it is, so Fitz Johnson running for reelection, no primary candidate, 3 Democrats, and he's in District 3, and then in District 2, Tim Echols running for reelection. He's got no primary opponent. He's got 2 Democratic potential opponents in the fall, including Russell Edwards, who is on the Athens Clarke County Commission and ran against Jody Heiss several years ago. There is no libertarian running in either one of these races, and that actually strikes me, because they have libertarians running.
They've run
in other races. Ryan Graham, who's been a guest on the podcast, he's running for lieutenant governor. There is a libertarian. Thinking out loud, there might be a different filing date for third parties or for political. Oh well, no, Ryan's registered. He's filed. So, and that's the reason that's notable, is because Libertarian Party candidates usually run in PSC races, because that is the easiest race for them to maintain their ballot access.
Right.
So I do find that interesting that they don't have anybody who's running as a Libertarian Party member.
Right.
In the PSC races, and hopefully Ryan, who I know usually listens to the podcast, will explain to me why.
Well, all right. So looking at the Secretary of State website, I noticed something interesting, weird earlier. There are, for example, Shane Hazel, had announced he's running for governor. If you look at the primary, if you select 2022 and then the primary election, his name does not show up. You select general election, nor November election, and there's his name. Well, okay. So I think, some of the. All right, so this also shows that Ted Metz is running for Secretary of State.
Yeah, and I see here Chase Oliver, who's running for U.S. Senate, and Shane's here as well. Ryan's listed here for lieutenant governor, and then PSC. There they are. They're the Libertarians.
Mm-hmm. There should be 8 of them, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I see one Libertarian who's running in PSC.
And a few, several, let's see, State Rep District 2, District 57, 106. I mean, several for, here you go. Appling County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. Got a nonpartisan person running in that race. So
I wonder why they're listed on one and not on the other. So
yeah, that's an interesting thing.
So
but
never mind, Ryan.
Yeah. So one thing.
Don't come at Jason, Ryan.
Yeah,
don't come at Jason.
Don't come at me, bro.
So Lieutenant Governor, 15 people, including the aforementioned Ryan, running for that seat. I count 9 Democrats, 1, 2, 3, 4 Republicans. So 10 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and a Libertarian. That is one popular office, man.
And
everybody wants to be
partridge in a pear tree.
It's not exactly. I mean, it's not that particular office. While it is next in line to become governor, is not. You're presiding over the state senate.
Oh, that is no. That's not no. It is far more powerful than that. It's one of the top 3 most powerful positions in the oligarchy that is the Georgia legislature. I would take it. You could give it to me for Christmas, and
unless your name is Mark Taylor, when the General Assembly strips all your power away.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Something else that struck me, and I want to, since we engage in wild speculation here, insurance commissioner of insurance. Let me scroll down there.
Patrick Witt.
Out of nowhere, Patrick Witt, we heard the other day that he was one of the cast of thousands running in the 10th district. He dropped out and, interestingly enough, is going to endorse Vernon Jones. And here he pops up running for, commissioner of insurance. I wonder, I mean, Trump has been, the Trump forces have been trying to put together a slate from top to bottom. I don't know what John King has done to offend the Trump to MAGA world, but he was appointed by Brian Kemp, so that's probably enough sin in his life to cause this to happen. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch and see if he emerges as the guy running on the Trump slate.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, Patrick Witt. It was reported by the Covington News that he was gonna endorse Vernon Jones. I don't know that he actually has, but they said he was going to. So, and he's supposed. I mean,
so all three people who were going to vote for Patrick Witt may now go vote for Vernon Jones.
Right. And when I was at FreedomWorks, I didn't work with the Office of Personnel Management that much, which is to say I never worked with OPM. But he was supposedly deputy chief of staff and acting chief of staff at OPM during the Trump administration. But it doesn't. This is from Ballotpedia. It doesn't say what years he served or whether he was there the whole time. I have no idea. But he so pretty. Yeah, he's the second former Trump administration staffer official next to, including Latham Sadler, who worked in worked in the White House.
Yep.
So
I have one more story from qualifying, boys, and that is in House District 17. State Representative Martin Momptahan has pulled not only a primary but also a general opponent. His primary opponent is a young man named Neil Wolin, who was sued civilly by a woman in South Carolina named Deborah Kemp. Deborah Kemp was a grandmother at the time. She sued Wolin for civil assault. She alleged that he ran up to her car while it was at a McDonald's drive-thru, backhand slapped her, and jumped in through the window. She was bruised for 4 weeks, suffered permanent injuries, and the case was later settled out of court. So that's also an interesting story. I'm sure that will be developing as the election heads towards that May primary.
Yeah. God, that's
so Andrew Clyde, the congressman for District 9, has drawn 4 Republican challengers, which is interesting.
That is interesting. I mean,
including my pal Gregory Howard, former chairman of the Gwinnett County Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean,
who does live in the district, by the way. I don't know about these other folks, but he does live in that district, in the district.
So is Andrew Clyde voting for Timmy Barr for Congress?
I think there's a video floating around of he and Congressman Heiss saying that endorsing Tim. And
I guess Tim Barr would be voting for Congressman Clyde for Congress at that point, right?
A little crisscross going on there.
That's so weird.
And then, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she who must not be named, the dark Lord herself.
No, we're not giving her that. No.
Okay.
I refuse. I veto.
What's the female of Lord? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. She's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 primary opponents, and
5 Republicans.
5 Republican primary opponents. Yeah.
Wow.
Eric Cunningham, James Haygood, Charles Lutton, Jennifer Strahan, and Seth Sinstein. I can't pronounce that, but yeah, his website is 14thdistrictdad.org. So pretty interesting.
Taking that one out there.
Yeah, but no, it's going to be that primary is going to be an interesting one to watch, and whether all of these folks actually. I mean, they're all now going to appear on the ballot. So, but yeah, I know Jennifer Strahan's been getting a lot of attention lately. So that's pretty, she seems to be, I think she's raised a pretty good amount. I just don't know. I don't know. You're gonna have to raise a lot of money to knock off she who must not be named.
Yeah. And I think it's always all of those people are kind of dividing up the anti-MTG vote into various little camps. So probably not helpful to the cause of getting rid of her.
No, definitely not. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shapes out. But but we noted earlier this week, I published a blog post at Peach Pundit noting that Jeff Mullis is not running for re-election. He has served in the Georgia General Assembly, the state Senate, for 22 years. He is currently the chairman of the Senate Rules Committee. and serves on several other committees, including Senate Appropriations. Mullis, I mean, dude's been around for a while. Very, very powerful member considering his committee assignments. He said, as we're nearing the end, excuse me, he said, as we are nearing the end of another legislative session, I've taken pause to appreciate what we've accomplished together and to consider my future, recovering from Achilles tendon surgery, witnessing my children step into the next phase of their lives, and the many hours away from my dedicated wife and family this job has led me to this time of reflection. God, I cannot read today. We have fought the good fight for 22 years, but I've decided I will not be seeking re-election. And as a publication, the only candidate who filed to run was Stephen Henry. I haven't looked to see if anybody else has filed.
Yeah, let me look. I think there were
Colton Moore.
Yeah, there's two. Colton Moore. Yep.
So that's a very notable departure from the Georgia General Assembly. That's a lot of legislative muscle memory. The legislature's already seen a departure of a lot of legislative muscle memory over the last several years, seeing more. What do you guys make of Mullis's exit?
Yeah, Mullis, he was an interesting guy. He was, one of the things he was known, he's very affable, very easy to get along with, which is tough to do when you're the rules chairman. The rules chairman in the House and the Senate is the guy who has to, or lady, who has to look you in the eye and tell you that your bill is dead. And that's not a fun thing to do all the time.
Enjoyed it though.
Yes, he enjoyed it. But you got mad, but he's a hard guy to stay mad at. He had walk-up music as he entered the chamber when a hearing started, and it was everything from Darth Vader to heavy metal music to you name it. So he puts on a show.
Yeah, and, he's sort of like a three-ring circus ringleader.
Yes,
and the Senate rules meetings.
Well, definitely, one of the colorful characters of the legislature,
I was gonna say boisterous, because I remember watching a conference committee with him several years ago, and I want to say it was over T-Splost. Maybe.
Might have been. Yeah.
I don't remember. And he was just going at he was just going at whoever was on the other side of the table. And it was actually some of the things I don't remember specifically what of the things he was saying, but he was effectively referring to the person from the House side on the other side of the table as stupid. And he may have even said it. I don't remember. This has been so long ago, but I was taken aback by it. I was like, geez, man, like, decorum, does that not mean anything to you folks in the Georgia General Assembly?
Now, all right. So now this is going to sound horrible, but knowing Mullis, it was half joking, half serious. I believe the bill was he was the guy who made fireworks legal in Georgia. That was his bill.
I joined in on the House side on that.
Scott was intimate in that, and Scott got angry emails for years, at probably every 4th of July.
There's a lady in Ranger, Georgia, who has tracked me down to let me know that her dog still hates me.
I'm glad Scott hates the nanny state as much as I do. I should be able to have fireworks if I want to.
So there were people who voted against it, right? And so there was a big. He got a copy of the list of the vote in the House. He blew it up and he had it displayed right outside his office, along with a sign that said, "If you voted no on this bill, don't even come in to see me about your bill because your bill's dead."
I did that too. I did that. No, I didn't do it that dramatically. The Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. There were a bunch of Republicans who voted for it, and I printed out the vote sheet, because I used to get the vote sheets from RSC staffers. And I printed it out and put it right behind my desk. And I was like, I will not work with these offices.
Yeah. Well, that's what he did. And it was huge. It was it was like 5 feet by 3 feet.
Yeah.
And it was posted outside as all. You could not miss it. if your name was highlighted in yellow, it took 4 or 5. It was so big, it took 4 or 5 passes with the regular highlighter to highlight your name. And I had voted against a lot of bills that Mullis had sent over the years, and I never seen that. On this one occasion, we were on the right side.
We're on the same
side of this. And he's like, and I went in to see him about a bill, and the first question was, "Is your name out there?" I was like, I'm one of the authors of the House version of your bill. He goes, "Okay, come on in." And then he saw I was wearing a lapel pin that had the Appeal to Heaven logo on it. He goes, "Oh man."
Yeah. He used to call us the pine tree people, right? That's
yeah, those crazy pine tree guys. And so I was like, "Well, I mean, should I go?" He's like, "Nah, sit down. We'll talk, I guess." But that's look, you couldn't be mad at Mullis for very long. And
right.
It was a big show to him. He treated it like it was a big show. And he was the king of red meat issues, right? Mm-hmm. The statue bill for Confederate statues, bringing that, the fireworks thing, I remember the very first time I ever went to the Capitol, I went down because of the Sunday alcohol sales bill. And I watched that debate from the gallery in the Senate. Just as a concerned citizen that wanted to buy a cold beer on a Sunday from Kroger. And he goes to the well and he goes, "This is not about legalizing beer sales in Georgia. This is about letting locals decide what's right for their communities. I would never be for Sunday sales in Chickamauga, but that doesn't mean I should be telling anybody what to do down here in Atlanta." And I thought, wow, this guy he's really good, right? I mean, that's making an argument. And then come to find out that he probably did enjoy the occasional Sunday afternoon mimosa. But all that to say, only recently did Chickamauga even decide to vote on whether or not to allow Sunday, like 2 years ago, allow Sunday sales. So he was absolutely right. It took him a long time to catch up with the rest of the state.
So funny Jeff Mullis story. In Lilburn, Georgia, not far from me, there is a very, very large Buddhist. I'm sorry, I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to offend millions of people. Hindu temple, a Hindu temple, and the leader of their religion, worldwide leader of their religion, was coming to America, and his first stop was right there. So I'm there. 10,000 folks from around the Southeast came to see this as a very, very important deal. And I walk in and there's Senator Mullis. And I think, what in the world is Senator Jeff Mullis from Chickamauga doing in Lilburn, Georgia at this religious gathering? And he says, "Well, we got a temple up in my district too." And he had a group of people from his Hindu faithful from his district there with him. So I'm sitting next to him, and this is also a story about Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp gets up. He had a proclamation to read to this religious leader, and I forget the name, but we're sitting there, and he's saying, "Well, we're going to welcome you to Georgia, and as a Secretary of State, we're making you an honorary citizen, blah blah blah." And his, in the governor's very thick Southern accent. And as he gets to pronounce the name, Mullis leans over and goes, "Oh, dear God, please don't let him screw it up." Tim nailed it, and it was great, and everybody was happy. And Mullis went, "Whew, boy, we're going to have big problems there."
So another big piece of well, it's not really a big piece of news, but governor's race, it is official. We have a primary between Brian Kemp and David Perdue, as well as a couple of other candidates, including Scot's favorite candidate, Candace Taylor. She did file, and then additional candidates, Catherine Davis, who I believe is the same Catherine Davis who ran in Georgia for all those years against Cynthia McKinney and Hank Johnson, and then Tom Williams, who I literally never heard of, and such a generic name, Tom Williams. So
the name,
so it's that's have you ever seen the movie Distinguished Gentlemen?
Oh, it's awesome.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it is the best movie I have. It's the most true to politics, with the it's the most true to politics of I've ever seen. So Anyway, sorry for the distraction. It's a Eddie. For those of you who don't know, it's an Eddie Murphy movie.
Yes.
Go find it if you can watch it. It's a great movie. The name you know. So Perdue. It's going to be Kemp and Perdue. That's obviously where this is heading. And you know, I know you guys have your obvious choice in this. Well, I know at least Buzz does. I'm not sure, or Scott does. I'm not sure about Buzz. I presume.
With TK.
So I know there was quite a difference in the energy of their filing. When they filed to run, because for those of you who for the uninitiated, you actually have to go to the state capitol. You have to walk in. You have to cut a check with your filing fee. You have to sign all the paperwork. So on and so forth. So sometimes it's a spectacle where candidates will bring their supporters and they'll have a little bit of a rally. Hey, Joey, he's back in your office. He is a very cute dog. Scott's dog just walked in for those who are listening, not watching. But I mean, the energy really wasn't there for Perdue, while it was very much there for Governor Kemp.
Yep.
Yeah. I was there for both of their qualifyings, and when Perdue was there, he didn't have a huge entourage with him. There were far more members of the media who were gathered around him in a gaggle. The light was on him. People with their microphones and voice recorders held out in his face. Probably 10 or 15 people brought with him total. And he had excellent opportunity for some photo ops. The Boy Scouts were there that day, so he stopped to see some Boy Scouts and got the photo op. But the visual was just not the same as when it was for Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp had hundreds of people there. I was among them. He asked, his campaign asked that I stand with him on the stairs as he made his speech, kicking off officially his campaign. And I took a photo. I posted on Twitter. There's just hundreds of people there. The energy was palpable. People were cheering. They were chanting 4 more years. And contrast that with the small gathering of people who were around David Perdue. Now, David Perdue did say some things during that gaggle that kind of stood out. He's been hitting the governor on the income tax, eliminating the income tax, replacing with a fair tax. He changed his verbiage on that to become a more gradual or a incremental step towards eliminating the income tax, which is the first time I'd heard him use that phrase. He had been beating the governor up, saying, why don't we already have it in a fair tax? So that changed. And he said that he's wanting to ask the governor hard questions. He committed to debating for the first time publicly, but his campaign hasn't nailed down the debates has not already agreed to debates that Brian Kemp has already agreed to. So tale of two campaigns. And this is what we're seeing this in the polls. We're seeing this in the grassroots areas. I had one reporter come up to me and say that he's been trailing David Perdue and unless David Perdue shows up at lunchtime in a restaurant, there are just no people showing up for him at these events that he's going around the state. Wow. He said he'll show up to a restaurant in a rural part of the state at lunch, and he'll take photos, and it'll look like there are a bunch of Perdue supporters there listening to him speak, but he's just there at lunchtime. Yeah. He said that the largest organic crowd, this is the reporter telling me, the largest organic crowd outside of the Donald Trump Jr. event has been 12 wow. people he's counted organically. The rest of the people in the photos are staff or people that have been bussed in from other areas. He said that, if you go to these events, you recognize the same people over and over again. You're usually from campaign staff for the Perdue folks. The energy is just not there. Well, and it's being reflected in, and you mentioned polling. It's being reflected in the polls. Mm-hmm. Fox News came out with a poll just last week that showed Kemp at 50%, Perdue at 39%. And then the week before, which I don't remember if we talked about this one, the Fox 5 Insider Advantage poll shows Kemp at 44% and Perdue at 35%. Now, contrast that with the one that came out in early December, where Kemp was at 34% and Perdue was at 34%. They were effectively tied. Well, that was an internal poll that Perdue had done. Right. So. But that says Fox 5 Insider Advantage, but whether that's a real clear politics error or not, I don't know. But, so Kemp's lead has gone up 10 points. Purdue's standing has only gone up 1 percentage point. And this Fox News poll, he's already at 50%. And, it didn't include by name Candace Taylor or Catherine Davis or, Tom Williams.
but it did include a selection for other, and he's still at 50%. Here we are. We're a little bit more than 2 months away from the election, for the primary election, and Perdue's got his work cut out for him, especially considering he hadn't raised a lot of money. He's struggling to gain momentum despite having the endorsement of former President Donald Trump. And let me repeat that, former President Donald Trump. He's wasting his time. He's wasting donors' money. He's taking money away that could go to Brian Kemp, and he's also he's making Kemp spend money when he should be focusing on the general election in the fall. I wouldn't vote for Brian Kemp. I would vote probably Libertarian, but there are
going to be several opportunities for us to try to convince you to change your mind of that between now and November.
but my point to all this is if Scott, we talked about the podcast. If you're a Republican, you're looking at this and you're saying, like, what are you doing, dude?
What are you doing?
Like, what happened? Really? Like, what happened to you?
Well, and I think this is to that poll you just mentioned that showed Kemp at 50%. That's after several weeks of David Perdue running ads with Donald Trump saying Brian Kemp has let us down, and David Perdue was a fighter. Stacey Abrams ran all over Brian Kemp, and David Perdue's going to stop him, and I fully endorse him. Weeks and weeks of this. I mean, I can't, there's not a day goes by I don't see it on social media. I've seen it on television numerous times during the Olympics and all this sort of stuff. That's over and over and over, and that gap just seems to continue to grow. Kemp seems to be gaining strength, and Perdue just seems to be flat. It's I don't know what what he does to turn this around.
Here's going to be
and change the dynamics here.
Here's the thing that hasn't happened yet, and the Insider Advantage poll notes put together by Matt Towery all but begged Donald Trump to come to Georgia and to spend money here. I mean, if you read his notes, he's like, it's going to take Donald Trump coming and spending money in order for David Perdue.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah,
and he basically outlined the strategy as a pollster, which I thought was weird. Why would you? Anyway,
Donald Trump, who, by the way, who's asking his donors for money for a plane.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But the
President Creflo dollar, Jesus.
Hey, at least Creflo dollars are going to use it to minister to bring people salvation. What's Trump going to use it for?
Like I was saying,
prosperity gospel. Prosperity politics.
Like I was saying, Donald Trump's going to come to Georgia. I think he's scheduled for 2 events, if not more. We'll see what the polls do after that, right? How strong is it enough for Donald Trump to look at you on Fox News during the ad break and say, I need you to vote for David Perdue, or having a rock star like arena event that he's typically having whenever he shows up to places, is that going to move the needle at all? I think if Donald Trump comes one time and it doesn't move the needle, then I don't think he comes back. No. I don't think he risks his own prestige, his own pedigree, his money, his name. I think he'll probably end up turning his back on David Perdue if it doesn't move the needle, because he doesn't want to back losers. He doesn't want to be associated with losers. Look what he did in Texas. He endorsed late in races where it was obvious people were going to win. He did not endorse against people who had previously spoken out against him. And he claimed this huge batting average because he wants to be associated with winners. He wants to make it seem like his name has prestige and pull. Those people were going to win anyway. Yeah. So if he's in a dogfight now. He's picked on a wildly popular Republican governor who kept our state open during the pandemic, kept us open for business, kept us safe from, only 0.3. And listen, I don't want to minimize the deaths or the illnesses that happened because of COVID, but it's a minuscule percentage of our population ended up passing away. So he tried to do his best to balance public health and economic health, and he did a fantastic job overall. I put our numbers up against any other governor from any other state, and when you compare our economic numbers in that mix, Brian Kemp has earned the Republican nomination already. So he's already done enough to earn that.
we've seen Trump. He's floundering on his strong endorsement of Mo Brooks in Alabama in the Alabama Senate race. Apparently, Katie Britt, former staffer to, I guess, Blumenthal, was that the senator's name?
Shelby,
yeah, went to Mar-a-Lago to talk at Trump's invitation because he's looking around. Now, I pray to God he doesn't endorse her because she seems rational and but yeah, I think you're right, Scott, that at some point he's just going to ignore Kemp and ignore Perdue and pretend that he never he never twisted his arm to get him into the race in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I want to move on. Because we have a few other things on the agenda to discuss. The next thing I want to discuss is, Herschel Walker has filed. He is officially seeking the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate, and facing Raphael Warnock in the fall, despite the fact that Warnock has a primary opponent. It's not serious. Walker won't commit to debates, and this has been like a recurring issue with him, that he doesn't want to talk policy and all. There have been a couple of things he said that actually, like the election's over, Donald Trump lost, so let's move on. That's a condensed version of what he said, but he won't really talk policy. Mm-hmm. And he said a couple things, in fact, that leads you to believe, like, are you really, like, because I think when it came to infrastructure, things like that, it's like, are you out of step with the Republican base? Putting him in a debate might be interesting, to say the least, because these guys who are running against him, Latham Sadler, Gary Black, and others, are going to come at him. Yeah.
Well, I think look, if you've got a 40-point lead or whatever the latest poll has, I mean, 40, 50, 60-point lead, you can't. There's nowhere to go but down. But the danger of that is we know Raphael Warnock is a skilled debater and a skilled orator. We know this.
Yep.
And you don't want the first debate as a Republican whose party is probably going to nominate this guy. You don't want that first debate experience to be fresh out against Raphael Warnock.
Right.
And I don't know that you can. He can get away with it now. I don't know that he can get away with it in the minds of voters in the fall.
Yeah, and on Monday, he told Bluestein, whatever. I'm thinking about debating Raphael Warnock because that's who I need to be debating right now. I'm going to debate Raphael Warnock because I'm going to win this primary and I'm going to go into the general. Scott, you buy that?
Herschel Walker is known for running over people. He's not known for running away from people. And he's running away from people right now. If he should use the debate period to sharpen his skills, or to show where he's weak, so that we could, as a party, do the right thing. If he can't debate Gary Black, now I like myself some Gary Black, but on a debate stage, he does not scare me. I don't care he does not scare me. Latham Sadler, doesn't have any name ID, does not scare me. If I'm Herschel Walker and I have the power celebrity behind me, I'm using this as an opportunity to sharpen my skills and to test my message.
Yeah.
I'm not running from anybody. I'm running over them. So yeah. Herschel, if you're going to run over people, don't run from people. And I will tell you this much, right? Herschel Walker has an opportunity to earn my vote as a Republican voter in their primary and beyond. I'm not voting for anybody who's going to run from a Republican primary debate. I'm just not. I'm not voting for you. And I might be the oddball on that. I might be one of the few people who's like, yeah, I'm not going to vote for that guy because he won't do that. I'm serious. I want to know that my nominee is qualified and can go up against Raphael Warnock in a tense and heated environment and stand up to the heat. I need to know that before the general election. I need to know that after or before May 24th. I need to know. So do me a favor, Herschel. Run through them. Don't run from them.
Yeah. So moving along to another subject. This is a blog post that I wrote. Another one that I wrote. I actually wrote 2 blog posts this week. Go me. Prolific blogger. So this one's stupid. Like it's stupid. let's go back to let me pull it up here. Last week or a couple weeks ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she who must not be named, even though that's the second time I've said her damn name today.
Yeah.
February 23rd, the day before Russia invaded Ukraine, Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "War and rumors of war is incredibly profitable, inconvenient, and just like that, the media now has a lie to use as the reason for our shattered economy and out of control inflation. What a sad existence it must be to shill for globalism and America last politicians." Interestingly enough, the day before she tweeted that, she bought between $1,000 and $15,000 worth of stock from Lockheed Martin, which is the Department of Defense's biggest contractor. What?
As she said, war is profitable. So
maybe she was trying to let us all know that we should go buy Lockheed Martin stock. She's doing a public service.
Yeah. As I said, all hail the war machine. I mean, look, Lockheed Martin's, I mean, it's also important to Georgia. It has more than 4,500 employees. Hold on, Scott. 4,500 employees. It is, and there's been increased debate in Congress over whether or not members should be allowed to buy and sell stocks. It is currently fine to do. It's not against the House, House ethics or House rules. There's a question of whether just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something to channel Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park.
Yes.
But this seems, this harkens back to something like David Perdue did back when he was at the beginning of COVID, when he was, trading stocks. I actually linked back to the New York Times story that David Perdue was like one of the most prolific stock traders inside Congress.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because she frames herself as an outsider, and that she is different than the current breed of politicians. She's right that she's different in the current breed of politicians, considering most of them don't go and hang out with white nationalists.
Right.
Ching.
But this is swampy behavior.
Yep, it sure is.
Well, okay. First, it's 15 grand. It's not like
at maximum.
Right. At maximum, she's not going to get rich off that. Look, don't put me in a position where I got to defend the lady, man. I mean, come on.
But we have
she does so much stuff that I disagree with.
We have to put this in context. Sorry to interrupt, Scott, but this is not an isolated incident. We also found out a while ago that she invested in all the companies that made the vaccines, even as she's telling people not to get the vaccine.
Well, an argument could be made there that she was acting not in her best interest if she was telling people not to get the vaccine, and she invested in companies that do make
that didn't matter though, because Congress was paying for the vaccine.
But I mean, look. But you can make an argument that she didn't vote for that. So she's not acting in her own best interest, and it's 15 grand. Look, I don't want to get it. I don't think that you should be able to trade using inside information, regardless of whether you're a congressman or not. Right. I think it's an unfair advantage for the rest of us. It tilts the playing field in ways that are unfair and is not free market principle at all. I mean, we should all have equal access to information if we're going to be investing, period. So I don't want to defend her, but I also look, the other stuff she's done to me is so much worse than that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
I don't want to be seen as knocking her every opportunity because it was less than $15,000. It's not, it's not going to make her rich. The optics are terrible, and I agree with that.
And that's what I'm trying to say. It just doesn't look good. And I'm not even making an allegation that she had insider information. She gets it's
pretty obvious what Russia was up to, right?
Yeah, that was all public information. Russia was going to invade Ukraine. Our own the administration had been saying it for like a month at that point.
Yeah, they have.
So
all that to say, her tweet was probably, like many things that she says, in poor taste. And that's really the problem with her. She has no sense of couth. She has no sense of propriety. She's a loudmouth seeking attention constantly.
But I think for her opponents, most notably Jennifer Strahan, who hit her on this, it's you can start to build a narrative. She pretends to be this champion for you. She can't get anything done, and she's up there like getting rich. Like she's not. She pretends to be a fighter for you. She's really not.
The one thing I do want to say about this story is that I read it first on Peach Pundit. Today, Bluestein has a piece on it. Today, you wrote that piece several days ago. So kudos to you for scooping everybody else in Georgia, Jason, and letting us know what's really happening. Get your best information from peachpundit.com.
Did Bluestein give me credit?
I don't know. I didn't read his article. I saw his tweet.
Probably not.
Oh, come on, Greg.
Jim Galloway used to never get us credit either. So
we try to give Greg credit every time we use
his stuff here. Or anything.
I'm looking right now, and I don't see anything.
Maybe Greg doesn't read us. Maybe he doesn't watch.
Well, here is one thing that I just to close this chapter of the podcast. In Green's defense, she said she gave a statement to Business Insider, which the AJC picked up. He credited them. This is what she who must not be named said to Business Insider. Our investment advisor has full discretionary authority over our accounts. We've owned this American company for years, and this small investment was part of our overall investment strategy. So she's blaming the investment advisor. That's
a common thing, though. That happened to Kelly Loeffler too, right? On her stock trades, she didn't realize that her advisor was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not usually a populist. This is one area where I'm like, members of Congress shouldn't be allowed to buy.
It's so hard to know the difference between, that they're receiving briefings that the American people don't get, that other investors don't get. There's all sorts of information just up there that the general public may not know yet. So
yeah. Moving along. So this is the area of the podcast where I have not read any stories and don't know what the hell we're talking about. So I do know that a couple of the Speaker Ralston's priorities are moving through the legislature, most notably the mental health legislation, which we have spoken about on this podcast before, not because I know anything about the legislation, more so that I have, I've got my own mental health issues in the past. Guys, give us Scott, you also mentioned here the Ukraine resolution. Why don't you give us a rundown on what's going on with those two particular pieces of legislation?
So it's been a weird session. Everybody in the hallway, the lobbyists, the activists who watched the session with great interest have all commented to me at one point, what a weird session this is. The speaker was in the well presenting legislation twice this week, which is 2 more times than he had in the last 6 years combined. He is rarely taken the well. He will occasionally take the well to do a morning order when it's to remember somebody who's passed away or a very critical event in our nation's history or state's history. Very rarely does he go to the well. He stands at the rostrum behind the well and runs the chamber for the most part. So when he goes well, it's a big deal. And this week he did it twice, not once, but twice. And the first one was for the mental health bill. He ended up getting 3 no votes, which led me to kind of jokingly say, well, as Speaker of the House, he's still looking for that unanimous vote because he hadn't gotten a unanimous vote on anything that he'd brought to the well. And I had something to do with that my first 5 days in office.
Yeah. So Singleton, Gilligan, and I forgot who the third.
Byrd, right?
Yeah.
And then Timmy Barr, interestingly enough, later on, he had an E next to his name, meaning he was excused from the vote.
Right.
But he later made a Facebook post similar to other members of the Georgia Freedom Caucus that you mentioned there. All 3 of them are recognized as Freedom Caucus members in Georgia. They all had made a very long Facebook post explaining their reason why they're voting against it. They likened it to Obamacare in a lot of ways, a government takeover of mental health care, involuntary commitments they pointed to, among other things. And even though Timmy Barr did not vote against it, he had the E, and he felt compelled to make a similar statement as other members of the Georgia Freedom Caucus, saying that he would have voted against it had he been there.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Scott. It's Speaker didn't get a unanimous vote, but it's sometimes people get caught up under the dome at the people who voted no. There were only 3 of them, and
Only 3.
only 4. If Representative Barr had been there, only 4 out of 180.
The new Fab 4.
Yeah, and so I think it'll be interesting to see how the Senate takes it up. It's a very important issue. Georgia has been knocked in years past for not putting the necessary resources for to address mental health. I think we were under a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice for a number of years because there's been a change in how we deliver these services. We don't institutionalize people so much anymore. We want them in the community around their loved ones and friends and family in a community. So that's a transition that's taking place in Georgia and another number of other states for a number of years.
And I think it's safe to say that model is failing based on the lack of capacity in these smaller communities to deal with mental health. Mm-hmm. And to that extent, the speaker deserves a lot of kudos. For tackling the issue. And I make jest of the fact that he had 3 no votes, but it's just jest. It's a joke. The issue is not a joke. It's not a funny issue. He's taken it on in a very serious minded way, trying to tackle one of the issues of our time. And so he deserves credit for that.
So one aspect of the bill, if I might, I'm in a programming here in Gwinnett called Leadership Gwinnett. The last couple of months, we've been taking a deep dive in law enforcement and healthcare and these sorts of things. So this week we had our meeting, and one aspect of that bill is going to take statewide something that Gwinnett County and a couple of the larger counties have been doing, and that's having mental health professionals in precincts, in police precincts. And so when there's a call that they think might be a mental health related issue, this person goes with the officer to the scene, so they can deal. And the point is, they're trying to get away from just grabbing people and throwing them in jail and then trying to figure out what's wrong with this person. They're trying to deal with it up front, so they can take that person to a hospital, to a mental to a place where they can get some mental health treatment and that sort of thing, as opposed to just putting them in jail where they don't have the resources to deal with those issues. So I think that's, we can debate about whether this is, I'm sure the Freedom Caucus folks would say, well, this is a takeover, a government takeover, et cetera, et cetera. But, these are real world issues on the ground that law enforcement has to deal with every day, and giving them some additional resources and helping them deal with these things that might be a mental health situation as opposed to a criminal issue, I think is a good thing overall. And I applaud the Speaker, Todd Jones, who carried it in the House as well. So
there are a couple of quick things I want to add as a point here. First of all, I remember when during the policing debate, there was discussion of having, someone else there to accompany law enforcement to determine whether the situation actually required an arrest, or some other, and that was panned by a lot of conservatives. Here we are looking at it in Georgia as a serious policy, and this bill hopefully does become law. The other thing is there's actually a real world.
If I might, Jason, it's not giving the officers expanded 1013 involuntary committal powers.
Right. And the other thing I'll add is there was a situation in South Carolina. I think it was over in Nancy Mace's district near Charleston, or in Charleston, where a gentleman, and I don't remember all the details of this story, but there was a gentleman who had some sort of mental health issue. I want to say he was schizophrenic. Maybe I can find it real fast. Mm-hmm. He was schizophrenic or something like that. And he was maced. And they put a face mask on him because he was they were worried he was going to spit or bite or whatever. So they maced him. Then they put the mask on. Then they maced him again, and he died as a result of that. I'm probably this happened sometime last year, and I'm not remembering all the details. I may not remember them correctly, but the guy definitely died, and they definitely maced him. and he had a mental health issue going on, and I don't remember why he was arrested, but I think it had to do with his health issue, either that or was drug possession, but I don't remember. But this is a serious issue that deserves serious consideration. There are a lot of people in the criminal justice system who have mental health issues,
right? And
that if we were addressing the core issue, maybe they wouldn't be in the criminal justice system. Scott,
right.
you wanted to say something, and I still
I was done with the mental health thing. If we were ready to move on, I was talking about the second thing, which is that the speaker did get his unanimous vote this week when he presented a resolution condemning Russia's illegal invasion of the Ukraine. He had some eloquent remarks. I found he said that we are all Ukrainians today. He talked about the attack by Russia on the maternity ward hospital and how grotesque the disinformation had been in the propaganda campaign that Russia is using against the Ukrainian people to erroneously justify their actions. So kudos to Speaker for both of those. I'm sure somebody over in his office will think I'm being insincere, but I do sincerely mean kudos to the Speaker and his office and his staff and everybody who's worked on those issues. I think they're important.
So I do want to note real fast that Congress did pass, as part of the omnibus legislation that was passed by the House and Senate this week, nearly $14 billion in aid, military and humanitarian aid. Obviously, the military aid will be there to bolster Ukraine in its fight against Russia, which was unprovoked and they didn't ask for. In addition to humanitarian aid for the countries who are taking in refugees. Some I don't remember. I heard numbers between 1.5 million and 2 million in the last.
That sounds about right. Yeah, that's what the media is reporting.
And while we've been on discussing this, Politico Playbook released its PM newsletter, and they got a scoop on this that said that there was a bipartisan group of 15 House members who sent a letter to President Biden yesterday asking for specific requests, and those requests were support for air defense capabilities, facilitate the transfer of manned and unmanned aircraft, strengthen economic sanctions, and bolster humanitarian aid. The economic sanctions that have been levied against Russia over the course of the past, this started February 24th, I think is when we started rolling out our sanctions, have been just crippling to Moscow. But I think, I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast before, but I don't watch cable news. Like I haven't really watched it in the last 7 years or so, except for special occasions. I watched it when I watched it when Soleimani was killed. Beginning of 2020, I watched it on January 6th and a couple days afterwards. And I've basically had CNN on since the invasion began. And it is really hard to watch what's happening in Ukraine and not be sad and angry about the brutality of Vladimir Putin. And what angers me even more, and I only take another couple seconds here, but what angers me even more is that we have some of our own idiots here in the United States who are parroting, and if not, parroting.
Madison Cawthorn the other day.
Yeah, Madison Cawthorn the other day, who called Zelensky a thug. Tucker Carlson, and
then somehow pushing woke. They're somehow pushing a woke ideology on who? I don't know.
Here we are in the United States arguing about pronouns, and you're saying this stuff, and then Tucker Carlson, who uses his show on a regular basis to defend Moscow, he's making claims, unverified and probably inaccurate, almost certainly inaccurate claims that Kiev had a biological and chemical weapons program. They've also said that they had a nuclear program, and Tucker Carlson hasn't said that, but Russia has said that, and Russia supposedly has proof of it, and it's just like, this is propaganda. This is propaganda.
But I was reading a Twitter thread about that. These are probably installations that the Russians built. The Soviets built them.
No, these are not Ukrainians secrets. Gave them up in exchange for never being being invaded by Russia.
Yeah, yes. Back in the 90s, they gave up all their nuclear weapons to Russia, and with a guarantee that they would never be invaded. And here we are.
Yeah, but they
I think that the Ukrainian is Ukraine is not a perfect country. There's been corruption, and there's probably corruption continuing to go on
Sure.
in their government. I'm sure there's all sorts of stuff. They're not a perfect country. However, no country is perfect, and they're clearly the victim here. They're not the aggressor. The idea that somehow they are equally to blame or more to blame, or that the United States is to blame, is just, it's all preposterous, and it's noise. To me, is that really selfish. I think, shows how self-indulgent and selfish our politics are these days. That we're trying to take this thing that is really aggression by a dictator and a international thug named Vladimir Putin, who has designs on doing all sorts of things, and trying to reframe that and make us the center of this story. We're not. This is a foreign policy thing between an aggressor who wants to dominate all of Europe and be the big guy in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with Joe Biden or Donald Trump or our internal debates and all the stupidity that we debate every day.
One thing I'll say, just in regards to Madison Cawthorn, children should not be in Congress. And if there's one constitutional amendment I would support, it's changing the age requirements. Because 25 at the time of the framers of the Constitution wrote it and considered it in Philadelphia, meant something very different from 25 today.
Meant you might only have 15 years left to get stuff done. So
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Hashtag children should not be in Congress. Scott, you got anything you want to add before I move on? Or are you pretty much done with me at this point?
I would vote against that constitutional amendment.
Are you running for Congress anytime soon? Are you running for the legislature?
Man, I've aged out of all that stuff. I can run for president if I wanted to. I'm that old.
I'm old enough to run for president, but you're not going to see me doing it anytime soon.
You ain't going to see me either. Hey, look, I told somebody the other day, because I got asked this week, Buzz, were you at the Capitol at all this week?
I was. Tuesday.
How many times did you get asked if you were qualifying?
Oh, a dozen.
Right. I could have if I had $1 for every time I was asked if I was going to qualify for office, I could have paid my qualifying fee easily. And that's not an exaggeration.
Hey, when you're a former rep, it's fun to hover around the qualifying room during qualifying week.
Fun. It's
People
so fun.
Come out of the woodwork. Rumors start floating around.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I told Bill Riley, this clerk of the House, to make sure that Spiro Amber knew I was in the building during and he stopped and he looked at me and gave me the side eye. He goes, that would ruin his day. I was like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, I do have a funny story. I was there when Stacey Abrams was qualifying. And
I noticed that she showed her ID.
Yeah, yes. You had to show her ID. But big crowd. I imagine it's probably bigger, a little bigger, not as big as Brian Kemp's, but probably bigger than the crowd that was there to see David Perdue. There was some cheering. And one funny moment, since we talked about Greg Bluestein, they were all gathering around. Bluestein was in there. He came walking out and kind of started waving, and the press starts booing. His colleagues in the press start booing him. That was pretty funny. That's
good
moment.
stuff. But I told everybody this week I was running for the state line, just not Alabama.
I believe in border control. We should put a fence around the state of Alabama.
Build the wall.
We got three more things, guys. Three more things.
Great.
And that last one's going to take a minute.
Yes.
Scott also put this thing in the agenda that I really don't know what the hell he's talking about, but this is lactation consultants get a win.
Oh yeah. This is big news, man.
Our friends at Institute for Justice
won
a court case nullifying a piece of legislation that Buzz and I both voted against as members of the House that licensed lactation consultants.
One of the few states in the country, I think at that time, only the second state to enact such a license at that time.
And we're talking about something that is a vital service to new mothers, and it created a pinch on the number of people that were qualified to do it. So there were basically overnight no lactation consultants as a result of this law. And so the Institute for Justice sued. It goes to the state. It's a state court. So it's possible that it could be appealed. We're hoping that Brad Raffensperger and Chris Carr will not appeal the decision and just let it ride. because the requirements to become a lactation consultant are all of a sudden very onerous. It's equivalent of getting a master's degree. And it's a crazy number of hours that you have to study and pass. And so this bill getting struck down is an opportunity for Buzz and I both say, we were right all along.
Occupational
licensing
laws are stupid. Occupational licensing laws are stupid.
It gets to the central point, the central problem that guys like Scott and I and you, Jason, have with this much of this occupational licensing regime. Lactation consulting is something that has gone on in the world since people started having babies, and women teach other women how to properly lactate their baby. It happens all the time. You don't need a freaking license to do it.
Most occupational licensing laws are ridiculous and stupid and designed to protect cartels. That's what they're designed to do. So glad to see this get struck down. Scott, be more clear next time when you put
I blogged about it. Didn't you read my legendary post?
Oh my God, that's what that was.
That was a big day, right? And then
legendary and raw milk passed the same day. Raw milk passed the same day that lactation consultants got knocked down.
Yes.
So I made a legendary post.
You are the biggest nerd I have ever encountered in my entire life.
You're welcome.
Never hated you. But see, I'm saying hate again.
You are welcome. I bring you a great amount of entertainment. I know I do.
So I'm gonna admit, I know that the next topic has been getting a lot of attention because Florida just passed a piece of legislation that's very, very similar to what's been introduced in Georgia. This is the quote unquote "Don't Say Gay" bill. And
can we stop calling it that?
As I understand it, and again, I don't know that I have a particular opinion on this one way or the other, and what I'm going to say is probably not super informed. But my understanding is basically telling schools they cannot teach like elementary school students about like sex and
That's
roles.
That's the Florida version of the bill.
Yeah.
In the Florida version, I think it's 3rd grade and lower.
Right.
Maybe wrong about that. But
right. If you're a teacher and you desire to teach a 2nd grader about sex, you don't belong in a classroom. It's not about not saying gay. It's about protecting these kids from advanced concepts that they should not be exploring yet. We're talking about 8, 9-year-olds, right? Yeah. Or 7, 8, 9-year-olds. It's too young. As a society, can we at least agree that a 7 or 8-year-old should not be talking about sex yet? That we should not be subjecting them to sexual content in a classroom? Can we agree on at least that?
And I mean, ultimately, those questions should be answered by parents in the way that the parents want to answer them. Exactly. If you're from a religious household, you can explain what you believe and that who these folks are. You know, if it's a gay couple, I have my niece is gay. She's married, and she has her nephews are 10 and 6, and the 6-year-old probably isn't aware of what's going on there, but the 10-year-old is. But it allows my sister the opportunity to kind of explain everything from her perspective and how you want them to learn something. So, I this is one of those rare instances where like it's hard for me to, just based on what I'm hearing without looking at the legislation, it's hard for me to get upset about it. Because parents got to step in and parent, right? So
and I think the bill that was introduced in Georgia, I haven't read it, but it was introduced too late in the process to go anywhere. So there's politics involved. What a shocker! There's politics in politics. But I think it's part of a larger debate that's going on about how do we handle these issues of what's age appropriate for kids at various levels of education, and it goes to books, it goes to all sorts of topics that are going on, and it gets to that concern I think that a lot of parents have about what's the difference, that fine line between education and indoctrination. We got to make sure educators are educating, and educators want to educate. Yeah. They don't want to indoctrinate the good ones.
Is the bill in Georgia 5th grade and below, or is it?
It actually only applies to private schools, which is weird. Like the bill was brought by Cardin Summers, who's a freshman senator, and our friend Eric Erickson, a friend of the podcast and of all Georgians. had a very interesting take. He's like, you can't teach Genesis in a private school if this bill becomes law, and because it's worded differently than the Florida one. It's been labeled as Georgia's version of the Don't Say Gay bill by the media, but it does so many more like weird things. And the sponsor of the bill said it was dropped too late for it to pass. So the only reason we're talking about it is because everybody else is. And what is important to know, it's not going to pass. And the sponsor of the bill said he only introduced it to start a conversation. Well, sir, congratulations, mission accomplished.
I actually
We're talking about you.
I have a problem with that, actually. It's geared towards private schools.
Yes, absolutely.
Obviously.
Yeah,
yes.
I have a real problem with that.
Absolutely.
As long as you're sending your kid to an accredited school, it's really up to the school. It's up to the parents what the kids are. I have a real problem with that.
Right. The language is riddled with in a private school you shall not types of phrases. Yeah.
No. That's a really dumb approach.
Yeah.
Speaking of really dumb approaches, this is a shot at the owners. The owners of Major League Baseball teams and the Major League Players Union have come to an agreement. We will have baseball. Baseball is back. I know everyone is excited. Actually, hold on a second. Let me grab it from over here. I got my.
Neither of you saw my facial reaction.
I try not to look at your face ever. So world champion, my Atlanta Braves.
That's what she said.
But baseball, I think it's got to be ratified. It may have already been ratified. I don't know yet.
I think
it has. Yeah.
We're gonna have a full 162 game season. Unfortunately, we're gonna have the universal DH. But this begs the question for everyone who's listening to this podcast, unless you're literally the spawn of Satan, are the Braves going to re-sign Freddie Freeman?
Oh, please
pay that man his money.
Give him.
It's going to be really hard to explain to people why they don't when the profit numbers have come out. The amount of money that Liberty Media, who owns the Braves and I believe Colorado Avalanche, to have that right, an NHL team, they are the most profitable company that owns professional sports teams, and how they cannot, they cannot claim that they don't have the money to re-sign Freddie, because they do.
Yeah, I mean it's the thing I read last night while I couldn't go to sleep last night at like 2 a.m. was that it's likely going to come down to the Braves and the Yankees, and I do not want my old staffer Dan, who worked for me at FreedomWorks, texting me and saying Freddie Freeman's going to look good in pinstripes.
Oh, they are. Yeah, I remember that horrendous reporter who was making from the Dodgers staff, who was making fun of us and making fun of Wall. Yeah. He's this morning tweeted, hey, it's time to bring Freddie over to the Dodgers.
Well, he's from Southern California, but they've got Max Muncy there. Yeah. And so I doubt that I think they're probably happy with Max Muncy at this point, and not wanting to spend a ton of money on a first baseman.
Muncy doesn't hit for average. Freeman does hit for average.
Yes.
But he hits for power, and he's got a good glove. I doubt Muncy has the glove that Freeman has.
No.
He's comparable. He's not as good. He's comparable, and the problem is with the Dodgers is they have so many other high dollar figure players that they've got Trey Turner now. Corey Seager just left, obviously, but their outfield is absolutely stacked. They're Justin Turner's at third base. I just don't see them wanting to increase their payroll that much to bring on a first baseman when they have a serviceable guy like Max Muncy.
I will say, and Freeman, by the way, finished one slot ahead of Muncy for MVP last year. But I will say the Braves made a couple of mistakes. The first mistake they made was locking up what's his name in left field.
Acuna?
No, not Acuna.
Ozuna.
Locking up Ozuna, to a large contract. Frankly, you couldn't do anything since the lockout began. So I'm assuming that there'll be some discussion of whether Ozuna gets traded or not. Especially because he didn't produce he wasn't producing in the way in 2021, at least at the beginning of the season, before he got hurt and then subsequently suspended, that he played in 2020. when he was in serious contention for the MVP award. And that season, for all intents and purposes, was probably an outlier in his career.
Could be. Yep.
But but you lock him up to a pretty notable extension.
Yeah.
I think it's what, Scott, 3 years, 4 years?
I don't know what Azuna's.
I think
no,
so. I
I
think
don't
3
know.
years. Yeah, and a lot of money. But so now, I mean, they've got the Braves are crowded in the outfield. The universal DH, as much as I dislike it, helps the Braves because in a guy like Ozuna, who's not a great fielder, probably makes a good DH. So
yeah, I mean he was hitting.
Blair is still out there. Eddie Rosario is unsigned. Fans would love to see those two guys back, but I don't know where you put them all. We got
Jock
the outfield's really
Peterson's
crowded.
free agent at this point.
Yep.
Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
Jock Peterson would make a good DH for somebody.
No, he would. He would. I mean, and he was looking up what he was getting paid. It doesn't say it on here. I'm guessing I just haven't looked it up enough. But I think he's making like 18 million or something like that. That's a contract that's dragging down the possibility of re-signing someone like Freddie Freeman. Plus you're gonna have some of these young kids who are playing for us. You're gonna be, they're in arbitration, and arbitration is basically a gamble in terms of how much you're going to pay someone. You have some of these other guys who you want to lock them up long term or as long term as you can, like we did with Acuna and like we did with Ozzie Albies. And we got a discount on Ozzie. Go ahead, Scott.
So a couple of the bad things that came out of this is universal DH. I happened to be at the last game where a pitcher had a meaningful at bat, and his name was Kendall Graveman, and he I believe flew out to right field, I think, if I remember it correctly. But I was present in the stadium for the last pitcher to ever have a meaningful at bat. I've always been of the Crash Davis. I think there should be a constitutional amendment outlawing the DH. So I'm sad about that. I am happy. I will say I am happy that the extra inning rule went away.
Yes.
Starting a man at second base was absolutely
9
ridiculous.
innings should be, a baseball game should be 9 innings.
Go ahead, Scott.
And so I'm happy about that rule change. I don't think the players really won here, and I'll tell you why. There are multiple classes of players. There's the ultra elites, the Freddie Freemans of the world that are going to do well with this. But the salary arbitration rules, the minimum pay for the guys who are just coming up, you got to stay with the same team forever. All that stayed in place. And that is it is a hard pill to swallow, that you're going to be at the arbitration table virtually every year until you have multiple years of service, and that you're going to be fighting for your salary every time. You can't actually enter into really real meaningful negotiations. The amount of money that was added to the various bonus pools was pretty pathetic, in my opinion. They upped the minimum salary from $500K to $700K. So all that to say, we're going to be right back here in a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I see a growing tension, almost like a populist movement amongst the players in their union, where these younger guys, the middle class so-called players, are going to be at war with the elites, because the elites they're going to kill it. Right. I mean, if you hit 40 home runs a year, you're going to be fine. If you hit 25 home runs a year, that's a serviceable Major League Baseball player right there. And they're not going to get paid. And so they're going to, at the next collective bargaining agreement window, we're going to right back here.
Yep. And you got to also think about one thing that the elites have to think about is baseball faces its own struggles, in terms of whether or not, because let's face it, for all intents and purposes, football has become the national pastime.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, attendance has been good at Major League Baseball stadiums, but
TV ratings are not great, even for things like the World Series.
Yeah. So it's something for baseball needs to think about, a lot of these things, because like demographic changes, things like that. A lot of your fans are dying. Your older fans are dying, and they're not being replaced with a lot of newer fans. You're not getting as many black baseball players as you used to.
Yep.
And a lot of your like half the rosters these days come from the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Venezuela. And that's something that baseball's got to start looking at, because it's
And the season is already long. Now you're going to have 12 teams in the playoffs. I mean, that you've lengthened the season even longer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's I mean, playoffs are exciting. Fans love it. You know, that's why it happens. But that's gonna. I mean, I don't know. Boy, that'd be end of November for the World Series champ is crowned.
Yeah, but before we go, I want to get you guys' take on the banning of the shift.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
I don't like the shift, but I wouldn't have made a rule to ban it.
I hate the shift, but yeah, Scott and I we were at a Braves game talking about this, and I think just if you're a hitter, you got to learn how to poke the ball the other way.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's hard because pitchers pitch you to hit the ball into the shift, and it's not easy. But that's why these guys are skilled baseball players.
Yeah,
you got to.
I mean, you gotta learn how to do an inside out swing. You gotta learn that pitchers have to know that you're gonna spray the ball around the whole field.
Yeah.
You know, it's and I don't like banning it either because it was part of baseball strategy.
Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, and it's always puzzled me. If you're Ozzie Albies, they're putting the shift on you. Why you don't just bunt it down the third base line every time
and run?
They're never gonna make them stop. You know, make them stop it by beating the shift.
Yeah.
And I'll leave the podcast with this one last thing that Tyler Matzik tweeted out on March 7th. Every rule change helps the hitters. Any day now, pitchers are going to have to tell the hitters what pitch is coming. Owners are selling offense, not baseball. Scott.
Love Tyler Matzik, by the way. Big fan. And he was absolutely right.
Yep.
We just got our final email from a friend of the podcast that has been sending us the final qualifying. And he broke it down. We'll post that on Peach Pundit. So make sure you're checking peachpundit.com for the most up to date, broken down by what type of race. But 70 near right around as best as I could count while I'm sitting here talking with you guys, 70 uncontested races out of the House and Senate combined. So of the 235 seats, 70 uncontested races, including Mr. Huddleston, who is the only non-incumbent to not have to face a general or a primary. So congratulations, you, sir. And then tons and tons of primaries, tons and tons of open seats, more open seats than we've seen since 2010, it looks like. Wow. So it's going to be a completely different legislature next year, and with definitely a new lieutenant governor, possibly a different governor. And we'll just leave the House the way it is, right? Yeah. But there are lots of new members there too. So stay up to date by visiting peachpundit.com.
And make sure you download, like, subscribe to the Peach Pundit Podcast from iTunes, from Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And also check us out on YouTube. And thanks for watching or listening this week. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Peace out. Later.
Dudes.